Welcome to the Restoration Herald. My name is Patrick Gray. I'm the minister for the Billerica Church of Christ in Billerica, Georgia. We want to welcome you to this new podcast as we are seeking the restoration of New Testament Christianity.
Good morning.
Good morning. How's it going?
Absolutely wonderful.
And who are you?
I'm Carol.
I'm Patrick. Good to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I got Carol today with me because anytime we're dealing with some of the heavier topics, I bring in the big guns, and so Carol, as you know, is the one who helps us with our all this technology stuff. I mean, I guess I'm not old, but I don't know as much as my grandkids, about computers and things. But I appreciate your help on it, and we want to welcome you to this podcast because today we are talking about a very current issue. It's one that, honestly, I'm kind of disturbed that it is even an issue.
Yes, sir.
It's kind of hard to believe, but we want to talk about transgenderism today, and we want to do so in a way I think that is respectful, but brutally honest.
Yes.
I don't want to hold back, but at the same time, want to be respectful because our goal here on this podcast is to reach out and to build bridges and not, erect walls or keep people out. But I want to talk to you about the issue itself. When we talk about transgenderism, of course, ideas pop in your head. You think of Bruce Jenner and how when I was a kid, I was sitting there eating my breakfast and I look on the back of the cereal box and there was this Olympic athlete that had accomplished all this. So we're all proud of him, and we all looked up to him. I want to be like that one day, And
one day.
And now he thinks he's a woman.
Yeah.
Well, what's even worse, Carol, is he thinks he's a woman, but people that talk about him refer to him as a woman.
Yeah, that's where we went wrong. I don't get it. I remember, what was that, 82, 83? Like you said, as a kid, eating Wheaties, or we would get the box and thinking that one day I want to be just like this man. As to now, I don't want to be nothing like Bruce Jenner.
You call him a man. I'm glad you call him a man.
That's what he is.
Well, that's what he is. Well, he can say what he wants to say, but it was great when you think about this whole notion. To me, it brings me to a bigger picture about the way our culture and society has so radically changed. If the Lord wills, this year I'll turn 60. So I'm not that old.
No.
I've been around just long enough to get started good. But at the same time, I've seen a lot of changes. Most of which I'm not real excited about. But I do remember. I'll just give you a few examples. I remember, as a young man, I would hear about people that were divorced, in church or maybe in our community, and even then it was, it was accepted. It was part of, everyday life. And it wasn't like these people that walk around with that scarlet letter we talked about before, but it had gotten that far. But still, there was some stigma to that. You didn't, people that were divorced, they were looked at as, something was wrong. Whether that's right or wrong is another topic for debate. I'm just saying that was the thinking at that time. And now we've come to a point where people are saying divorce, who need to get divorced? We're just shacked up. We're living together. We talked about that last week. And so, to me, it's sad to see how far we've drifted in our cultural norms. But then I remember as a teenager and then as a young man in my early 20s, homosexuality was viewed then as, completely taboo.
You didn't talk about it. Well,
no. And if you were inclined to be that way, you certainly didn't let people know about it. You were, as we said, there was a term in the closet, and when they started coming out, there was a coming out phase in the 90s, during the Bill Clinton era, and everything was okay, I suppose, in the roaring 90s, whatever you want to call it. But that was a major shift. And so we saw that with the homosexual, movement. But now we're actually talking about whether or not it's okay for a creepy middle-aged man to go into a girl's bathroom in Virginia naked in front of little girls because he claims to be a little girl. And the policy at the time when that happened, and that was September of 2023, or I think it was last year, I believe. I might have my date wrong, but it wasn't long ago.
No, it wasn't that long ago.
And he goes into the bathroom, and the mother reports it, and the authorities are like, well, we can't do anything about it because he's claimed to be transgendered.
That's ridiculous.
It is absurd.
That's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. And like in the prisons now. So if you, let's say you get 20 years and, you know, for murder or whatever you've done, and you're facing life, which is 25 years, and you all of a sudden decide, you know what, feeling like a woman today. Now they're taking prisoners and allowing them to have sex changes, and even in the waiting period, and putting men in women's prisons. And if you look it up, there's been so many rapes and pregnancies now. And as a people, we're supposed to accept this. It's gotten out of hand. It's gone too far. If you're born a boy, you're a boy. If you're born a woman, if a girl, you're a woman.
But, you know, here we are discussing reality.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay, that's another word for truth, but we're just discussing what is. You know, you hear the phrase all the time, it is what it is, right? Mm-hmm. You are what you are.
You are what you are.
And, you know, you're born with either male chromosomes or female, and you're one of two. And the fact that we're having to bring this issue to light and discuss it and break it down, I think is really a sad commentary on our society.
Wait, I'm sorry. I don't mean to stop you, but I'm so glad that our new president has taken it back to saying, hey, there's only two genders, not 85.
And the mainstream media is freaking out.
Going crazy.
You know,
how did he say that?
Yeah, what a radical position to take. Are you kidding me?
Are you serious? Yeah.
I mean, I'm just saying how far we have drifted as a culture in our thought process. It's bizarre. Yeah, I think about Joseph Goebbels, I can't remember that guy's name, that Nazi, you know, from the German Nazi regime of the 1930s. A lie once told remains a lie, but a lie told 1,000 times becomes a truth, he said. Of course, it was his boss, you know, Adolf Hitler in Mein Kampf, who coined the term big lie. And the idea was, if you just repeat something often enough, say it often enough, then it becomes true. You know, if you say the president wants to take away your Social Security, enough, well, you're going to believe it because everybody in the mainstream media is saying it. It doesn't matter what actually is taking place. It doesn't matter, you know, what reality is. It's just what you've been told it so many times. It's kind of like that, you know, we live in a world where if you say, I don't believe the earth is billions of years old, I think we have a world that's somewhere between 6,000 and 8,000 years old. People think you have lost your mind and you're denying science. And like, it's sad because
I've had that conversation with people and they quote Jurassic Park. Things like, you're going to quote a movie? I'm going by the Bible. You're quoting a movie. But
I think we should stick with the facts and stick with science. And again, that's the problem, is that people are gullible. We believe, you know, something just because everybody believes it. Now, I want to share with you, these are news headlines. I want to set the stage.
Okay.
And this is something I just got off the internet. This is from 7 News, Fairfax County, Virginia. I'm just going to read it as it's written. Okay. Registered sex offender Richard Cox allegedly exposed himself to women and girls in the women's locker room at Oakmont Recreational Center in November of 2024. But he also allegedly exposed himself in the female locker room at the Audrey Moore Recreational Center in Annandale in November, according to Fairfax County. A Fairfax County police report first obtained by 7 News said that Cox was allowed to use the Audrey Moore Rec Center's Center women's locker room because he identified as transgender. This is the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors policy. The police report also said that when police provided the facts of the case to Fairfax County Commonwealth's Attorney Steve Descano's office told them there were no criminal elements for a charge. Now, on Thursday, 7 News emailed Descano's office, the headline says, and asked why he didn't pursue charges against Cox for allegedly exposing himself to women and children at Fairfax County recreational centers. And Descano's office hasn't answered yet. You know, okay, I'm thinking, and there's more to this story, and I didn't read all of it, but there was a call made by the mother of one of these girls to complain, and actually the police arrest this guy. He's a sexual pervert. He's actually been in and out of prison for the last 20 years. We know.
He's a registered sex offender.
Yeah, he's a registered sex offender, and so she called, and she didn't know that time. She just knew there's a naked man in my little girl's locker room. So and the police said we can't do anything about it until the policy changes, because that's what I'm thinking to myself. Okay, look, this is part of the problem. It's the bigger part of the problem, I think. It's not that we have people that have completely lost their minds and touch with reality and claim to be something they aren't, but that so many people are kowtowing to it, and they're actually giving it legitimacy. Well, he claimed to be a little girl. Who are we to say he isn't?
Right.
I mean, it's crazy.
So if he had identified as a straight man, they'd have locked him up.
Yeah,
basically.
It makes me want to say, let's defund that police department. I'm like, come on now.
Yeah.
I mean, are you seriously saying that as a cop? I mean, I could come up with a charge. I'd say, hey, he spit on the sidewalk. I mean, something. Get the guy out of the locker room, for crying out loud. But that's what's wrong.
That is.
We've lost our ever-loving minds.
Oh wow! And it upsets me as a father.
Yeah.
As a straight man, what would I do in that situation?
Don't ask me that question. This is being recorded.
Oh yeah. Never mind. Yeah. Well, chances is somebody would have to bail me out that next morning.
I mean, it's just crazy.
This is ridiculous. And as a people, we're supposed to accept it.
Yeah. And you're mean-spirited if you don't.
Yeah.
This whole issue, it exposes a real deep cultural divide. And as I guess Americans, but just as human beings, we are terribly divided.
Yes.
For example, this week in the Senate, Senate Republicans had passed a bill saying that men should be excluded from female sports, from competing with females. Of course they should. I mean, I'm thinking, what dude, is going to demean himself enough to say, well, hey, I can't win against my other guys, so I'm going to go beat up on some girls. Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry, I come from a John Wayne generation, so I'm like, there's something really off with that picture,
right.
But that's where we've come as a society. That's what we're supposed to believe. But every single Democrat voted against it. And I'm thinking to myself, and I know a gospel preacher that is defending those Democrats. I don't understand that. What are we doing as a culture and as God's people in particular? How are we possibly contributing to this? We have worldviews really that are when I say worldviews, I mean people that view the world very differently. I see the world as God's creation. We are accountable to God. He gave us His Word to guide us and lead us. And then there's that other group that believes that we're just mindless matter, and we're here by biological happenstance, and that we have no purpose, and there is no God, and we don't answer to anyone, and so anything goes. It doesn't matter. But even in that world, I'm like, if I were a pure secularist and an evolutionist, and I really believe that, why would I want to, in any way, help my species, quote unquote, by promoting these kind of insane concepts? I mean,
it's like everyone, they were brainwashed. Here in these past couple of years, like how did we get to this point? Where and you have to know it's wrong. You have to know your view is wrong.
Yeah.
But because you don't want to be canceled or you don't want to hurt someone's feelings, I'm sorry. A great preacher I know said, "I could care less what the world thinks. I want to make sure I do right by God." Exactly.
Yeah. He was a smart guy, whoever he was.
Yeah, I mean, he really. Anyway, he was. I mean, but he was right when he said it.
Well, that's what the Apostle Paul said, in the book of Galatians. But so, look, when you talk about the Bible, what does the Bible say about transgenderism? Well, it's kind of like the term dinosaur. It doesn't come up in the Bible. It's a modern term, but there are passages that do address this phenomenon that we're seeing today. And I want to begin with just laying out the framework here. Okay, I'm going to go back to the very beginning, which is what Jesus did. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. But in Genesis 1, in verse 26, God said, "Let us make man in our image and after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, the cattle, the earth, every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in His own image. In the image of God, He created him, male and female, he created them. Then God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply. By the way, if I'm having relation with a person of the same sex,
You're not multiplying.
No, it's not going to happen. And a man can dress like a woman all he wants to, but he's not having a baby.
Exactly.
It just can't happen because God didn't make us that way. We weren't designed like that. You know, when I mentioned this again in another podcast, but in Matthew 19, when Jesus was asked about marriage, divorce, and remarriage, when they wanted to know, can we divorce our wife for just any cause? But Jesus answered, have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female? So when you, again, I'm a Christian, okay? So as a Christian, I'll look at things through the glasses, the lenses, or the prism, or the perspective, however you want to say it, that Jesus had. And so I'm seeing this issue today, as he would. Well, from the beginning, God made male and female. He didn't make male, female, and something else. The scriptures only speak of two genders.
Two genders, yes.
And so we can't, I don't know where this idea came up that, you know, I can be whatever I want to be. And how many genders, I forgot. There were dozens of them I heard last time. I'm like, what is that supposed to
be?
In
the 80s. Last I heard was like in the 80s.
Wow.
That's ridiculous.
I mean, where do people come up with this kind of twisted imagination? I mean, but again, I'm a Christian. I'm not ashamed to say that. And as a Christian, I like Jesus. I see the scripture as something that cannot be broken. He said that emphatically in John 10:35, the scripture cannot be broken. Well, I see it in the same light. And so I have to view things from that perspective.
Yes.
You know, the perspective of scripture. Now, there's a question that comes up in this discussion usually about, you know, genetic malfunction, you know, mutations, and birth defects, and the question of like intersex individuals, people that have, you know, that can have both male and female organs, and it can be confusing. But even in those cases, with intersex individual, you are either male or female, but your body parts may be a little bit confused, but you can still determine whether you're male or female, which is an interesting discussion. You know, there's another term that used to be used to talk about people with, you know, confused body part. I think
hermaphrodite.
Yeah, hermaphrodite. Yeah, that's not really a term people like to use much anymore. It's kind of almost an insulting term. They say, well, you know, that they don't want to be referred to that way, and I guess that's a topic for another time. But what I want to say about all this is that pointing to a genetic mutation or birth defect and saying, you know, that proves that, you know, it's okay for me to say I'm a whatever.
No,
it's a leap in logic that just it hardly even warrants the time to answer it.
I mean, and that's like one in every, like, I'll check and do a fact check on it because someone else will. But I think that's being a hermaphrodite or being born a hermaphrodite is like one in every 100,000. It's very far if you can.
Yeah, and it happened.
Yeah.
But you know, Jesus himself acknowledged there are people born with certain birth defects. Even in Matthew 19, when he was going back to that marriage divorce question, when he finished with the Pharisees, his disciples said, Lord, if that's the case with the man, it's good that he should not marry. And the Lord said, well, you know, some people have been made eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven's sake, and some men were born eunuchs. In other words, they were born with not able to reproduce. Now, that's a genetic, you know, anomaly. It's not something that should happen, and it's a birth defect, and the Lord even acknowledged that. And we live in a fallen world. And as Paul said in the book of Romans, all of creation groans and travails together as a result of sin that we're responsible for. We brought this on ourselves. And we want to blame God. Well, if God's so good, why did he let that? God didn't design us this way. He didn't design a world where we have these problems. We created this mess, so we need to stop blaming him about it. But again, to suggest that, you know, birth defects or genetic anomalies is somehow legitimizes Bruce Jenner's claim to be Caitlyn or whatever. You know, you hear people in the news talk about him, and they refer to him now as a her. I'm like, why? Because he says he's a her. So we got to refer. I'm sorry. You know, you can get offended all you want to, but if you're a dude, you're a dude.
Yes. Yeah.
And if you're a dude dressed like a woman, I say you need help. You're something wrong.
Yes. Yeah.
Terribly wrong with your thought process. I certainly don't think it helps anyone for us as a society to say, well, okay, so you think you're a woman and you're going to claim to be a woman, and I'm going to, coddle you in that claim. I think it's better for that person to hear, well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but let's sit down and address the root cause. What's really, what's going on here? Because clearly you're not thinking straight.
40, and you think about it, I'm not saying this to be funny, but 40, 50 more years from now, we'll have people walking around claiming to be a horse, and we'll have to accept.
They already are claiming to be cats and stuff. I mean, it's happened right here in Allen County. I mean, a woman was seen in the grocery store walking around on a leash, meowing at people. I'm like, this is bizarre.
Yeah. And if we continue to just let it go, who knows?
Well,
who knows?
That's why we're dealing with this, Carol. And I hope that people don't get the wrong idea. I mean, I've got some pretty strong feelings about it, and that's probably coming out in this conversation. But I don't really care about my feelings on it so much as I want to address the reality of it. And I know sometimes when we're talking about those that are defending this, they'll say that we are in this conversation confusing biological sex with gender, which that's bizarre too. But they talk about having our sex assigned at birth. So I was there when my son was born, for example, and I was standing right there, and the doctor took him into his hands, and I heard him take his first breath and cry. It was really spectacular. It's life altering, when you see that. But it was a boy, and I looked at my wife and I said, "We got a boy."
Yeah.
And now I'm thinking, maybe I made a mistake. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. And the fact that I can see, obviously, from his body parts that this is a boy. No, maybe I shouldn't have said that because I'm just assigning that. It's absurd.
It is. It really is.
I mean, what are we dealing with here?
Yeah.
I mean, what kind of argument is that? I don't even know how to respond to it anyway, but, God, these people contend that God, might have created them, for example, to be a woman, but, biology had a different agenda.
God doesn't make mistakes.
No.
First and foremost, God does not make mistakes.
That's true. And we're fearfully and wonderfully made, the songwriter said. And we've been woven together in the mother's womb. These are beautiful pictures that the songwriter had about how God makes us and creates us individually to be either male or female. But honestly, Carol, this is being straight with everyone. I have to check my attitude as a Christian, because, and my heart, because anybody that knows me knows I have a tendency to be a little bit of a smart aleck, or sometimes, I've been told that, and sometimes use a little sarcasm, and sometimes I feel like a comedian. There's so much rich material here. I mean, man, we could go all day, but that's not what I want to do. And you may be, people listening to this may say, well, I know what well, okay, fine, you know how I feel, but I'm not here to talk about that, and I want to emphasize that. I don't want anyone to get lost in this discussion on what they perceive as what I might think or how I might feel or view it. I want them to be challenged, to examine honestly and sincerely the issue that we're talking about today. You ever heard someone say, I feel so strongly about it?
Yeah, yes.
And so, if you feel strongly about something, does that make it so?
Not at all. Not at all.
I feel really strongly that I was born to be president of the United States. I mean, this whole idea of having to go through a campaign and get elected, that just kind of gets in the way. So I'm just going to claim, I'm president of the United States.
Well, and now we have to accept you as president.
I said it. You got it.
It's just that easy nowadays. It's just that simple.
Yeah. You're a billionaire.
I am now. Yeah.
I've heard you claim that, so I have to accept you as a billionaire.
Yep.
I'm still waiting for my.
It's in the mail.
Oh, thank
it's
you.
in the mail. But yeah. So because I feel it, and because you feel it,
I mean,
the world has to accept us for that. No.
Feelings don't equate to reality.
Exactly.
Sometimes you can feel very strongly about something. You remember in the book of Genesis, Joseph's brothers, sold him in slavery, Egyptian slavery.
Mm-hmm.
And they came up with a story to cover their tracks that, with the coat of many colors, that, Daddy, apparently our brother's been slain by wild beasts. And, the dad bought the story. And he spent days, Jacob did, mourning the death of his son.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality of the situation was Joseph was not only alive, but was going through a process providentially to actually become prime minister of Egypt. But he thought he was dead.
Yeah.
So his thinking that and feeling that didn't make it so. And we could feel a lot, we could be misled. We can be lied to and told a number of things. It doesn't make it so just because I strongly believe it or I want it to be. A lot of times the argument is made when you're challenging someone, when they make a claim, a guy says I'm a girl or whatever, and you question that. They say, you're not being fair to me. This is not right. It's not just, because you're denying my true self, my true identity, my feelings. Again, this podcast, this discussion we're having today is based on a biblical view.
Yes.
On every matter, and particularly on moral issues. And so we're not really interested here today in reasoning, in that kind of reasoning, but simply pointing out that being a Christian requires denying one's self. I mean, at the very beginning, Jesus said, if you would come after me, if you would follow me, what's the first thing you do? You deny yourself. But I'm a woman. Well, okay. If you feel that way and you say you can't tell me not to say that, I can definitely say that, because even if you feel strongly that's the case, the first order of business in becoming a Christian is denying yourself. And so that this whole notion that I got to be who I feel like I should be and want to be, we really need to be asking, what would God have me to do? And what's God's will for my life? In Romans 12, and Paul said we shouldn't be, conformed to this world, but transformed by the renewing of our minds, which means I need to educate myself with the will of God, the Word of God. What does God think about certain things, and see things from God's perspective and not my own. Well, since God made us binary creatures, He did make only two, male and female. It follows that He would be displeased if we sought to confuse this reality. Wouldn't you think so?
Yes.
Well, in the Old Testament, and these are a lot of times these passages are used as, see, there you go, quoting the Old Testament. Well, we don't live under the Old Testament, but we do learn something about God's view of things. And for example, in Leviticus 18, Moses said, "You shall not lie with a male as with a woman. It is an abomination." Leviticus 18:22. That would be confusing, your gender roles, right? And then in Deuteronomy 22, in verse 5, a woman shall not wear anything that pertains to a man, nor shall a man put on a woman's garment. For all who do so are an abomination to the Lord your God. Now, again, a lot of people, will say, yeah, but that's Old Testament stuff. And, there's so many passages in the Old Testament about not eating pork. And I got to have my bacon. But I'm glad we don't live under that law. But there are some timeless principles.
Exactly.
And biology is one of them. And morality. Those are things that don't change, even with the changing of the law. But in the New Testament, this same idea that God is displeased when we confuse our gender is also discussed at length. For example, 1 Corinthians 11. You mind if I read that?
Yeah, please do. Please do.
Okay, in verse 2 of 1 Corinthians 11, Paul said, I praise you, brethren, that you remember me in all things and keep the traditions just as I deliver them to you. But, he said, I want you to know that the head of every man is Christ, the head of woman is man, and the head of Christ is God. There's a hierarchy.
Yes.
And he just lays that out here in principle. Then he says, every man praying or prophesying, having his head covered, dishonors his head. That would be, he dishonors Christ. But every woman who prays or prophesies for their head uncovered dishonors her head. that would be her husband. For that is one and the same as if her head were shaved. And I've got to hold my tongue here because I saw that speech the other night and saw some of those people in the gallery. Anyway, with shaved heads. Anyway, but for if a woman is not covered, let her also be shorn. Mm-hmm. But he said, if it is shameful for a woman to be shorn or shaved, let her be covered. For a man indeed ought not to cover his head, since he is the image and glory of God, but woman is the glory of man. For man is not from woman, but woman from man. Nor was man created for the woman, but woman for the man. For this reason, the woman ought to have a symbol of authority on her head because of the angels. Nevertheless, neither is man independent of woman, nor woman independent of man in the Lord. For as woman came from man, even so man also comes through woman. But all things are from God. And then he says, judge among yourselves, is it proper for a woman to pray to God with her head uncovered? Does not even nature itself teach you that if a man has long hair, it is a dishonor to him? But if a woman has long hair, it is a glory to her, for her hair is given to her for a covering. And then he says, if anyone seems to be contented, we have no such custom, nor do the churches of God. I mean, this is the rule. And Paul is saying, this is the general principle. So, you can question it, Corinthians, if you want to, but he's discussing natural norms, as he calls it, nature, and long hair versus short hair. Mm-hmm. And other words, there's always a debate. Well, how long is long and how short is short? Well, I don't know. If you see a woman with her head shaved, literally shaved, and because she chooses to be that way, not because she has some, physical, malady, but
cancer, I can understand.
Yeah, of course.
Things happen.
We're not talking about that. We're talking about someone that chooses to cut her hair off.
Exactly.
Or if a man grows long hair, you say, why are you? In other words, why are you wanting to confuse people?
Yeah.
Because you're born a guy, so dress and behave. Look like one. Yeah. And that's the principle here too. Yeah. In 1 Corinthians 11. So it's not just Old Testament stuff. Mm-hmm. This is also in the New Testament. Our culture, Carol, is apparently confused on this issue, and so it's imperative that we speak out on it. I might again say it's sad that we're having to do so, but our goal isn't to mock anyone or to build walls. Our goal is to urge others to just go back to God's way. Let's return to God's way and will. And it seems like the further away we get from God and the Bible, the more bizarre our behavior. Yes. And the more insane concepts and practices we're embracing. And
it's being forced upon us to embrace it and to accept it.
It's sad.
And it's just going to get worse.
Yeah. Well, and it's going to get worse because, as Jeremiah said, "Oh Lord, I know that the way of man is not in himself, not a man that walks to direct his step." Mm-hmm. If we're left to ourselves, helpless, because we're in a big heap of mess because we don't know what we're doing, and so we need to listen to our designer, our creator, and we need to get back to these simple, as some say, common sense practices. Yes. And let's open our eyes to what's really happening, and let's keep pedophiles out of the girls' dressing room. I mean, come on, if we can at least do that. I mean, wow, that's pretty bad. Okay, I'm gonna stop before we go too deeply into this, but. Thank you, Carol.
Not a problem. Not a problem. Anytime.
I always enjoy having you on the program, and
being here.
You always do a good job of not saying anything and letting me do all the talking. But anyway, in all seriousness, those that are listening, tuning in, please search the Bible, search the Scriptures with an open and honest heart, like the Bereans. Search daily. And see whether or not what we're saying here is actually true. If this is God's will and God's word, then follow that. If it's not, then reject it. But again, it ultimately comes back to what God's word says. Thank you for listening, for watching, or both, whatever the case may be. But like or dislike or comment, or please share this podcast with others and help us to get the word around. And until next time, may God bless you in the study of His Word.